Hi, everybody. I'm Diane Brady. I'm here with David Fish, who is Senior Litigation Counsel at Romano Law, which, among other things, specializes in employment law and also entertainment law, which is perfect, David, for talking about what's happening with Lizzo right now. I should mention you're in a case that can't be mentioned in Nashville. I take it you're in a hotel room right now. Is that right?
I am in a hotel room. Yes. Yes. This isn't my
Well,
normal digs.
this is not your normal digs, but what do you make of this case? This is three dancers that are suing the singer Lizzo over a hostile work environment. Is this quite common?
Employment cases actually make up a fair amount of the docket in both federal and state court. Is it common for large employers, well-known people to be sued? Yeah, it is. One of the things that plaintiffs and certainly plaintiffs' attorneys think about if they're going to bring a suit, beyond whether there's liability, and we could talk a little bit about the allegations of the complaint, is there somebody to pay at the end of the day? You could be wronged, you could bring a lawsuit and be successful, but is there someone on the other side that's going to satisfy a judgment? Clearly here, there are
Right.
defendants of the company and Lizzo individually. They could satisfy a judgment. So these are fairly common.
Well, I would think, let's talk about what's unique and what's common here, because a workplace, if whether you're a dancer or whether you're working in an office, a workplace is a workplace. Is that correct? Or is there anything uniquely different about this kind of entertainment workplace? These are dancers that are on tour with a singer that's a certain image. Does that factor into what constitutes hostility or a hostile environment?
Well, I mean, you point at which makes this particular case and cases like it interesting because they're very different types of workplaces. I say at the outset, there are certain rules that apply across the board. Sexual harassment or hostile environment, sexual harassment, which is being alleged here, is if you're subjected to unwelcome sexual conduct in any setting, that could be actionable. But
Yeah.
I think what you point at is important here, that working in a traditional office space, you are not exposed to the same things you are when you are a dancer on a world tour for a very, very famous artist who uses sexuality as part of her image and act. How do the expectations change? Like I said, certain things are always off limits, but being exposed to things that are arguably sexual in nature, there has to be an understanding you're going to see some of these things. Although the complaint kind of goes a little bit beyond,
It
but I
goes,
think what we
well, we should talk about the specific complaint, but before we do that, I think it's also interesting to note, I think of celebrities often would have very extensive contracts when you work with them, certainly around non-disclosure. There's certain things you can't put in a rider. Is there, like, for example, like there would be no contract that would protect a singer like Lizzo against these charges simply by virtue of people signing their rights away?
that's right. You can't have someone enter into a contract which allows you to evade your obligations and rights and your obligations under the law, or ask somebody else to give up rights, constitutional rights they may have. So, but what you say is important in that there are certain things you can waive or acknowledge. You know, I mean, there were allegations of the dancers being, and it's questionable the way it's drafted, whether they were forced to go to sex clubs and participate, or encouraged or shunned if they didn't participate. Um, you could say, I guess, in a waiver that you may attend certain establishments. Is that okay with you? But
You
again,
may be
even
exposed to nudity, that sort of thing.
yeah,
But
yeah.
well, let's get into a little bit into the case here. How much could one be liable in a case like this? You mentioned deep pockets of corporations, celebrities, any sort of, I don't know if there's any sort of standard as to what one could possibly gain here.
Well, there are standards. There are different types of damages you can collect in a case like this, and I'll be a little general, but there were, I would say, three main categories, arguably four. It's just back pay, right? They're alleging, in some cases, they're alleging they were outright terminated. One of the plaintiffs is alleging that she resigned because of the conditions. So part of it is back pay. You can collect your salary from the date you were wrongfully terminated, if it's
Yeah.
determined if you were wrongfully terminated, to today, right? You can collect all of that money. Now, it hasn't been a very long time. These terminations and resignations, forced resignations, were just a few months ago. So there's that component. There's a second component called compensatory damages, and that's a broad component. That's where you hear things about emotional pain and suffering, the damage that somebody suffers as a result of being discriminated against and mistreated in the workplace. And there's no formula for that, right? Like there's a formula for back pay. It's pretty easy. We could add it up.
Right.
Compensatory damages for emotional pain and suffering, I hate to say it, but juries kind of make it up. They
Do
can
these
get
tend to
some
be
guy-
jury cases? Are they always jury cases?
These tend to be jury cases, and they have a right to a jury in a case like this. So, you have attorneys persuading a jury how severe this was and the impact it had on the individual and why the award should be X. And then you have somebody else explaining either that what they're alleging isn't that severe, or maybe that whatever they're suffering is a result of something else. Maybe they had a pre-existing condition, and in fact, one of the plaintiffs actually alleges she had suffered from
An eating
anxiety.
disorder, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, what is the
yeah.
third bucket? You said so there's the compensatory, there's back pay. What is the third category?
So the third bucket is punitive damages,
Huh.
and that's where things can get serious. Punitive damages have nothing to do with somebody's actual damages. They are simply a statement from the fact finder, jury, or judge to the defendant saying, your conduct was so egregious, willful, outrageous, that we're punishing you. And that, for a large corporation or a high net worth individual, if it's found they acted so outrageously, those are where the awards can become very big. The fourth thing I just want to answer really quickly that I
Uh-huh.
mentioned in thing is they also can collect their attorney's fees. And that can become significant if a matter continues on for a significant period of time. Sometimes
So we're
that
talking
becomes
millions. I mean, was it?
certainly could be.
And I'm familiar with corporations having these sorts of judgments. I'm not aware of many celebrities who've had workplace type judgments. Is this something that happens often in Hollywood, or would it be an anomaly if she's found guilty?
I don't think it happens often, and I do recall that some celebrity chefs had cases brought against them. I think those were largely in wage cases where employees were alleging that they weren't paid the minimum wage or other benefits they were supposed to receive, and there were some large awards in those cases. But this could end up being rather unique. I mean, there have been some civil cases against celebrities, notably recently because of a verdict in the UK. Kevin Spacey had been sued civilly for certain sexual related misconduct, and was found not liable. So it isn't.
And
to
that
say
was
when
him. That was his personal actions as opposed to the environment he was created. So what would you be looking for? Let's take both sides. Let's start with the plaintiffs. Obviously, they felt they had a strong enough case to bring forward. Were there particular flags that you thought, yes, this should have been something that at the very least should have been addressed or could have been a red flag to Lizzo's team?
Well, I'll start with a little bit of the unsatisfying answer that these are just allegations, right? So
Right.
there's nothing
proven.
established. Right. So I guess what you do is you sort of play it both sides. You say, let's assume these are correct. Let's first assume that what the plaintiffs are saying can be proven. You do have a lot here that's problematic. Not all of it. I think a lot of the allegations are somewhat conclusory. There are a lot of allegations that seem to be jumping to conclusions as to what was in other people's minds. But definitely, forcing or highly encouraging with the pressure of your job on the line to engage in sexual conduct against your will. And by the way, off premise conduct, right? It doesn't have to happen on stage, it doesn't have to
Yeah.
happen in the office, in the back room. These are events that the employer is condoning. That should be avoided. You should never put an employee in that position. And at the first sign that there's any kind of hesitation for an employee to do that, that's it. You got to
Yep.
stop. So assume what they are alleging is correct. Yeah, there are violations here. Some of the other
Let's
ones are a
talk
little
about
more.
the defendant. No, go ahead. Go ahead. There are other things you want to mention?
Well, some of the other ones are a little more vague, I would say. There were allegations of religious discrimination where one of the key people, spoke and preached a lot about her religious beliefs and, pushed the idea of being against premarital sex. The interest, and this is where you start to dissect complaints. You have that, and then you also have allegations that this same person was uh, simulating oral sex and talking about masturbation. So
So
it's
which is it, right?
which is it? Not that it can't be both, but it makes one look at the complaint with kind of a crooked eye, right? What's really happening here?
Well, so let's take the defendant. Lizzo's already been out there basically disputing the allegations. Is that a wise move to begin with? Should she have kept her mouth shut, or because she's such a public figure, she needs to get out ahead of this?
So the first answer is I would always tell a client, don't say anything. You have nothing to say. And even if you're put on the spot, you say, my attorneys told me not to say anything, right? You blame them. So you don't have to appear like you're being
But
rude or trying to put them off.
but like no
Well,
comment, that can imply a bit of guilt, right? Not
I
good for
hear
the
you.
brand.
Right, right. And that's why I sort of say my attorney told me I can't say anything. This is different though. So I do understand her need if she feels she's innocent to go out there and say something because it's not just legal here, right? It's her public image, it's her brand. So I understand that. And, if I were her attorney, I could understand maybe talking with her about saying, I understand you do need to say something because this is you. This is very personal. This isn't suing a corporation, right? Without a face. This is a face. This is her, and it's very personal. So
Now,
I understand her.
when defending somebody like this, what are some of the factors you would consider? I mean, the fact that two of these employees were fired, I'm assuming could be something that could be in her favor.
Well, if there was a business reason and if it was performance based, and that's another interesting thing about the complaint is that there is discussion about the fact that she complained about performance. She was warning employees about using alcohol on the job. She asked a lot of the employees to sort of re audition because she was concerned about performance. If she's legitimately concerned about performance, that's a legitimate basis to terminate somebody or to
Mm-hmm.
change how their working conditions. So that's legitimate, and that's what you want to find out. I mean, a thorough investigation internally is needed here to find out what motivated Lizzo's actions and the rest of the staff.
So just step back to a 30,000 foot view. I know you mentioned Kevin Spacey. Obviously, every celebrity, anybody with a high net worth, is always going to be a target and also has responsibilities because they hire staff. In general, are you surprised by this case? Is it quite common to have this kind of dispute come up? It rarely rises to the level of a lawsuit, but you must see a lot of these come across your desk.
See a lot of these. I see it less common with a celebrity of her stature. A lot of times these things are resolved before they even reach this stage. And most of these cases are resolved also. I mean, the thing that would really surprise me is if we're talking a year or two from now and there's a jury selected and this is going to trial. That would be incredibly surprising. But these cases are not that rare. The one thing I'd add also, and I represented a stylist who brought a claim for not being paid wages against a very well-known performer. And the thing that these plaintiffs are going to deal with, wrongfully, rightfully, whatever it is there's going to be backlash. Now they have to think about in the industry, that is much smaller than people might think, where's their next job? Are they going to be welcomed onto another set, to another production? You hope that employers don't take into account somebody's legal history, as long as it's not damaging to them. But this is something that they're going to carry with them. This is a public filing, right? We're talking about it. It made huge news.
Yep.
Their names are out there. What's next for them in their employment is a big question.
How did it impact your stylist client? Did he or she find it difficult to get work after getting a judgment?
He did. He found it difficult being involved in this. And fortunately, I think his talent, trumped his legal situation. And I'm really happy to see that. But it was difficult. It was difficult, not just in finding work, but in social media and the, what you hear from your fellow stylists
Yeah.
and from people who have no idea even what's going on, but like the artist, right?
Yeah, Lizzo fans are certainly making themselves heard. Well, thank you, David, for making us smarter about this. And is there anything else on your radar that you think would be important to watch as this case unfolds? Even if the case continues to unfold, it sounds like it'd be surprising to you if this actually ever gets to trial.
Yeah, well, that's one. I mean, I'd be shocked if it went to trial. I think the next few months are going to be interesting because this is definitely a time when it makes sense to try to resolve these matters. I can tell you from my own personal practice, if you have to get to the stage of filing a complaint, very often that's a good time for the parties to come together and say, all right, we're all upset, but is there a way we can resolve this where we can move forward with our careers, our lives in a way where we're not damaged? So, yeah, I think the next few months will be interesting.
Hard to put a price tag, but would you put it, do you think it could be a hefty price tag to reach that settlement so it doesn't go to trial?
It is really hard to answer that. But because they've gone to this point and put themselves out there publicly, hired counsel, this is going to remain with them, for the rest of their life. I think it probably will be a pretty hefty price tag. Whether or not he's engaged in this or not, I think it's a hefty price tag.
Yeah. Okay, well, good to know, and I look forward to continuing the conversation. So thanks for joining us, David.
Thank you. I enjoyed talking with you.